Join us on this 5 miles kayak from Port Eynon to Oxwich on the Gower Peninsula on the 1st of June 2024. Watch on to learn about the stunning beaches we passed on this route, including Port Eynon Beach, Horton and Oxwich Bay. The history of this area, including the dubious practice of smuggling, which was practiced in days gone by on this stretch of coast, how we coped with the tidal race off Oxwich Point, what kayak we used on this trip, and the amazing scenery along the South Gower coastline. This 5 miles paddle was on a stretch of the South Gower coast between Port Eynon and Oxwich. Launching at about 2 p.m. from Port Eynon, we paddled eastwards along Port Eynon Bay. After paddling all the way around Oxwich Point, we landed on the long beach at Oxwich at just before 4 p.m. We launched at 2 p.m. from the beach at Port Eynon, which is the most southerly point on the Gower Peninsula. We're paddling eastwards along the sand dune backed beach at Port Eynon, looking across towards Horton on the west end of the bay. The wind was stronger than the forecast had suggested, and slightly worryingly was more of an offshore wind rather than coming from the west. We got to the west end of Port Eynon Bay and began to swing out along the long stretch of rocky headland leading out towards Oxwich Point. We passed a trio of paddleboarders coming from the other direction, who were obviously heading back towards Port Eynon. They were a friendly bunch. It's always nice to exchange pleasantries with fellow paddlers out on the water. I don't think that my balance is good enough to go paddleboarding. I'd probably spend more time in the water than on the paddleboard. Port Eynon slid away in the distance as we paddled down the west side of Oxwich Point. In the background you can see the headland of Port Eynon Point, which is the southwest end of the Gower Peninsula. There's quite a renowned tidal race off of Oxwich Point, which can result in the water off the point becoming quite rough at times, as the tide runs across the reef which extends out to sea. Therefore, we'd planned to round Oxwich Point near to high tide so that there would be fairly slack water then. It was high tide at 2:40 p.m. on the day of our trip. We launched a bit behind schedule, and so we were in a bit of a hurry to try to get around Oxwich Point before the tide started to go out. Smuggling was engaged in by the local residents for centuries. We had so much baggage with us in our kayak that we could have been mistaken as smugglers looking to hide our contraband out on Oxwich Point. According to legend, both the Salt House and also the ancient Culver Hole Cave at Port Eynon were used by powerful local brigand John Lucas as part of his smuggling operations. I think that John Lucas may have been one of Sheldon's ancestors, based upon the amount of beer that Sheldon brings on some of the kayaks we go on. There are great pubs either end of this route, the Ship Inn at Port Eynon and the Oxwich Bay Hotel at Oxwich, although I should stress that this had nothing to do with us choosing this particular route. As we neared Oxwich Point, the offshore wind was making the sea increasingly choppy, but as you can see by Sheldon's face, he wasn't in the least bit worried. As we near the tip of Oxwich Point, the headland is actually giving us shelter from the offshore wind, so to our relief, the sea has actually got a bit calmer. It's just gone 3:10, so it's about half an hour after high tide, and as you can see, the tidal race is starting to run off Oxwich Point, but luckily it's not running very fast yet. We tentatively edged out through a small gap in the reef which runs out to sea at the end of Oxwich Point. Sheldon directed us through from the front of the cockpit like a seasoned maritime pilot. You would never have thought that this trip was only his third sea kayak. However, as soon as we passed onto the east side of the reef, the tidal current caught us, and I thought we were going to end up being carried out to sea and added to the list of over 250 vessels which have been wrecked along the Gower's coastline. We both had to paddle full speed to make progress against the current of the outgoing tide. The tidal current tried to pull us out to sea like a tractor beam, but we managed to gradually escape its pull as we slowly progressed away from the point. That will teach us for launching later than planned, although I'm sure it won't be the last time that the kayak crew start to paddle behind schedule. If we'd been an hour or more later, then the outgoing current of Oxwich Point may have been too much for us, and also it would have been rougher out there. We paddled down the eastern side of the headland towards the long sands of Oxwich Bay. Oxwich village was once a port exporting limestone quarried from the headland of Oxwich Point. In the distance to the east across Oxwich Bay, you can see the magnificent Pennard Cliffs rolling away towards Pultey Head, which is the highest headland in the Gower. The offshore wind was blowing hard into our faces, making the final leg of the journey towards Oxwich quite hard going. We didn't mind though, all the more time to take in the grey views of Oxwich Beach, set against the backdrop of Kevin Bryn, a 5-mile long ridge which is known as the backbone of the Gower. On this trip we were using the tandem version of the Sandbanks Style Optimal full drop stitch inflatable inflatable kayak. The deck and hull inflate to 12 psi, so are very firm and help to give it performance similar to a hard shell kayak, but with the portability of an inflatable, since when deflated it packs away into a large carry bag. We have done a full review of the Sandbanks Style Optimal on our product reviews playlist on our YouTube channel, which is linked below. It also comes in a smaller solo only version. In terms of logistics, we had left a car at the end of the route at Oxwich, where there is a large car park next to the beach. We had also left a car at the National Trust car park at Port Eynon, which is also next to the beach there. You have to pay to park at both of these car parks. If you only had one car, then you can get bus 117 to get from Oxwich to Port Eynon or vice versa, as of the date of this video being made in July 2024. Notwithstanding our warnings about the tidal race off of Oxwich Point, this is in fact a relatively safe paddle, since both Oxwich Bay and Port Eynon Bay are both quite sheltered. However, you do need to try to paddle with the tide, and make sure you go around Oxwich Point within an hour at most either side of high tide, so there will be fairly slack water then. This 5 miles trip was part of our undertaking to paddle every section of the 870 miles of the Wales coast, and the inset map shows in red the sections we'd already paddled up to us doing this Gower kayak in June 2024. We plan to call at the Ship Inn in Port Eynon afterwards for a beer. I think we've definitely earned it after all of the paddling we've done this afternoon. As we approach Oxwich, we're just passing St Illty's Church, which dates back to about the 13th century. If you enjoyed the video, then please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing by clicking on the left below. Click on the right below to be taken to the playlist of videos of our other trips around the Wales coast. Don't forget to check out our website, which is linked below. Happy paddling from the kayak crew.